Change is hard, not because you're doing it wrong, but because it asks something of you. Welcome to Change is Hard, a podcast from the Leadership Lab. I'm Audrey Blair, and this is a space for leaders who are learning how to sit with uncertainty, make decisions without rushing, and grow without losing themselves in the process. We'll talk about the moments that stretch you, the conversations you keep avoiding, and the quiet shifts that change everything. No noise, no pressure, just honest conversations about becoming the kind of leader and human you actually want to be. Let's get into it. Today, I'm talking to Hanna Bauer, who brings a really interesting mix of lived experience, leadership development, and Lean Six Sigma into the conversation. We talk about how leaders can get better at noticing signals before something becomes a crisis, how hidden waste shows up in teams, and why process improvement is not just about efficiency, it's also about protecting human potential. Now, this conversation is about resilience, disruption, and building systems that actually support the people that are doing the work. I hope you enjoy. Here's my conversation with Hanna Bauer. Hi, Hanna. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. And why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about you? Give us a minute about who you are, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a entrepreneur turned into a leader by a lot of different accidental things that then became very intentional in what I did. But really what I do is I help other growth-minded leaders like myself to turn that friction into traction that is holding them back, actually that friction in their teams, so that they can then scale, get the breakthrough that they need to scale. So a lot of times this is come from not only the new technology incentives that may come in the things that they may be trying to implement, but also may come from additional human relationships that are going on in the system. So I help them get ready with the human readiness for traction, scalability.
Yeah. Okay. But you actually started your life early on. You had some challenges early on, right? You had some things that you went through to help you
Yeah.
to build your resilience from an early age. Can you just give us a minute about that?
Yeah. So at an early age, at the age of 4, I was diagnosed with a heart disease that went on through until I was about 14. And what that was tachycardia and arrhythmia. In my case, they were lethal rhythms and there wasn't a cure in sight. So a lot of things were tried. I went through 2 heart attacks, consistent heart failure as I went through growing up and as a teenager. But really, the last 5 years, as I was in the heart transplant list, is when an opportunity came after a failed open heart surgery and a failed heart cath to do something that had not been done before. And my doctors is where a lot of the story comes in, because grateful that not just looking for a short-term solution but for a long-term solution that was not only going to give me life, but a quality of life. We went for it. And this ended up being a innovative surgery that now not only, at least at the latest count I got was 10 years ago, where 3,000 kids have been saved, but also is the way it revolutionized how heart disease is treated now with laser and electromagnetic waves and things that are now, just outpatient, but not back in 92. It was
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So that's pretty amazing. So in some senses, you going through that, and even the doctors pioneering something certainly at an early age for
Yeah.
you, and that you are obviously here and healthy and doing well. That's pretty amazing. And I remember that because when we spoke before, you talked about, which I thought this might be a good way to bring some of this in, is that you talked about growing up around heart monitors. You
Hmm.
talked about growing up around signals and beeps and things like that.
Yeah.
And it taught you to pay attention to signals.
Yeah.
So if we bring that into the space of leadership, what would you say right now are some signals that leaders are missing?
So there are a couple of things, right? I mean, even a little precursor to that is there was so much uncertainty. Like we couldn't do a forecast. Oh, if you're gonna do this, or if you eat this, you're gonna feel this way, or if you do that, if you do this, it's gonna get better. There was no something that will make it better. There was not something that was going to tell me, hey, if you do this, you may go through some hard issues later. And so the uncertainty factor was a big deal. I think in that sense, that's where the monitors came in, right? Because the monitors, and just the ability to try to get a baseline of what was going on before these episodes would come in, what would, if there were any triggers, things like that. So it was a very intentional moment, understanding that there was so much that was happening unintentionally. And I think that's one of the things, even as leaders, that we need to do, right? Because there's a lot of uncertainty. It's like, okay, there's so much change. What change do I need to look at? There's so many
Mm.
initiatives. Which initiative do I need to be looking at, or need to look at? So, well, sometimes I see that even the tendency is to like, I'm just not going to look at anything and let it just, if becomes a problem, kind of like the squeaky wheel gets the oil, we got very practical ones that if it starts making a problem, then I'll put my attention there. Or, if something happens, if they have questions, then I'll go to that, right? More of a reactive sense instead of that proactive. So I think there was a couple of things with that. I mean, even in the monitors, as uncomfortable as they were and everything, it was trying to, in some sense, give a baseline to chaos. And I think, again, with leaders, I'm seeing that there's so much chaos. They really have lost in touch of what the baseline is. Also with what is dysfunction right now, even a time like what they're going through, but also what is well, where are we taking our teams to? So some of those signals that are missed as well, I see even in the monitors, which, hey, I got well, right? I'm here. But then the other thing that happened as a result is I didn't know how to measure myself because I was consistently relying on all these outer things, right? Like, hey, I would even just my doctor's face or the nurse's face or my parents' face. Those would be signals that would tell me, you're not going to die today, you know? So there were the very bad moments where I mean, I don't understand what all the monitors mean. I don't understand all the readings. I would understand people's faces, right? But then that also made an over reliance on me on understanding what is good, what is not good when it dealt with my body. So that was also another part of me after the monitors that I had to not only give myself the time, understand what my own humanity was. And I believe also that's something necessary too, that where the leaders are, hey, we went through a pandemic. It was what we call a new normal. Hey, we're going through economic change. Hey, we're going through market disruptions, and where we're getting our bearings to it, but not giving also get enough time to understand, okay, what are those signals internally in our business that tells us, hey, we're well, the internal, the even being able to get into that rhythm, or what is that new rhythm, because things have changed. I mean, it won't go back to the past. There's some things that I don't want to go back to the past. I don't want to have a heart disease, but I had to get into the wellness, and that took work.
Yeah.
To be well with being well took work as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you brought up a couple of good things around, you talked about reactive versus proactive and paying attention to the squeaky wheel. And it reminded me of thinking about the signal and the noise. So, what would you say the difference between the signal and the noise in leadership as it relates to, as you said, there's all of these things going on. How do they then, how as a leader do I go, okay, which of this is just noise? As you said, I hear all the beeping, I hear all this, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be paying attention to. So I figured out, I now know, can trust when I look at the doctors, when I look at, my parents, I can read that signal and not pay attention to the noise, which can be very, very distracting.
Oh,
And you
yes.
can think of the noise as that can be the squeaky wheel versus what do I actually need to be paying attention to? So what would you say, what's the difference is, or how do you differentiate the signal from the noise?
Okay, that's really good. That's a really good question because I really we live in a environment where it's all about attention interruption, right? It's like look at me, look at me, look at me. So that's just the overall culture we're in. I mean, we that's just how it is, right? So which ones do I, even as a human, as a person, okay, what do I really need versus what is a want versus like I wasn't even thinking about buying that. Why am I in the shopping cart with it? Even things like that, right? So and we see that. So we are brought up with that. So it is a very much a cultural right now in our environment, just without even trying to like, hey, I'm going to change an organization, I'm going to go do my thing. I mean, it's just where we're at. And what I would say the number one thing and something that I teach my leaders consistently is that internal alignment for external execution. And if you don't know, you're not in charge. Again, the intentionality, what does intentionality come into? Intentional in my purpose, intentional in my strength zone. And as a leader, intentional in building those environments where that strength zone and purpose is also lived out by the ones that are with me, that are in my teams. So what does that look like? Yes, it's kind of like motivation, right? People say, well, motivation doesn't last. Well, neither do showers. That's why we say, right, take them every day. It's like the same thing, intentionality. Like they don't, it's like, oh, well, yeah, I did that yesterday. Well, yeah, culture is developed every day. You're either taking in or taking out. Kind of like you don't just make one deposit into your bank account. You're consistently making deposits into your bank account, not because you had a really good paycheck a month ago. Is that going to carry you through next month, next crisis, next year? No, it's the same thing. So when we're talking about what do we look at with noise versus signals that I need to look at, is whatever is not a noise is something that it doesn't impact my alignment. It's not in with my purpose. I can go ahead, but I won't know that unless I know what my purpose is, unless I know what my identity is. Same thing for my business. If I don't know my mission, I don't know my vision, I don't know my values, how we do things, everything else from the outside, the next vendor coming down your door is going to tell you why you need this. The next software developer is going to tell you, hey, this is going to change your life. And if you don't have a understanding in the core of who you are in mission, in values, in vision, it's going to be, yeah, everything's going to look good. And not every opportunity is good, right? I mean, there's a lot of distractions and we have to be aware of that. So the more as a leader, how to differentiate, getting in touch with your purpose, getting in touch with your mission, your vision internally and in the organization, and making sure you're equipping your leaders to do that, because that's the only way that they're going to be able to differentiate, this is for us, this is not for us. And it goes beyond the KPIs. I know we have KPIs, start answering that. KPIs are a way that we are able to measure that, but there's so much more than just the numbers. There's the environment in which this KPIs, the whole purpose of a KPI is not just to do the KPI. It's what, if we do this KPI, what is it going to allow us to do? In understanding what that activity really opens up to really doing, is going to help me. Hey, this is getting in the way. We don't need to be looking at this right now. Or, yeah, this we need to be because its mission is a vital, critical, mission critical point.
Yeah, getting those KPIs right are so essential because that can also lead to a misdiagnosis, if you will, of the problem if you're measuring the wrong thing. So what you measure actually matters. You got me on the whole shopping cart thing because I'll have things in my shopping cart that I go back to it and I'm like, do I even need this? Because
Yeah.
the new currency is attention. I
Yeah.
mean, that's when you're if you're going through any training, marketing training or any new marketers these days, that's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Attention is the new currency. So the
Yeah.
goal for everyone out there is to grab your attention. So what you're
Yeah.
paying attention to matters. And I like what you said. If it's not aligned with where you're going, if it's not aligned with the core values, if it's not aligned to get you to that goal, then that really is how you figure out that's just the noise. Now I need to sift and filter through the signal because lots of salespeople are also trained on telling you what you need. Here's a problem you didn't even know you had.
Yeah.
Let
This
me
is the
tell
real
you about
problem.
this problem that you have now. And now let me sell you the solution.
Yeah.
And it's just so much of that going on. It's
Yeah.
and that's not anything new. It's just coming from everywhere these days. It's
Yes.
so much and it's so wild, right? So yeah, I agree with that. So you also have a skill that you leverage. I want to talk a little bit about. You're also a black belt in Six Sigma. Is that right?
Yeah. That's correct.
Okay. So, and I was curious when you were talking about that is when people hear Six Sigma, they think about manufacturing, efficiency, defects, process improvement, which it is. All of those things are.
Mhm.
But we can also use it with leaders. And I know that's something
Oh,
that
yeah.
you use with leaders as well. So, what changes when we apply that lens to leadership? So maybe if
Okay.
I ask it in a different way, what are the leadership defects that you see most often?
Okay. Oh, this is huge. Okay, I can spend hours on it, but so here's the deal. Like, let me go back to my heart a bit because there was no cure. And what was going on? Basically, I had too many of the nodes in my heart that were firing all these electrical nodes that were making the heart go really, really fast, which we all need, right? You need to go your heart to go fast when you're running. And but I also had the arrhythmia, which made it go kind of like flatline. And basically, there were all these firings going on internally, and basically, I had too much of a good thing. Okay. I had a lot of energy. I had a lot of notes. So what was the innovative part was they literally went in there and burned the spots in my heart. They literally basically had to kill parts of my heart, which is like, well, no, you want to keep your heart healthy. Who kills a part? But that's what essentially what it was in order to get rid of all these other things so that there could be a clear pathway for the electricity that's in the body to be able to flow that then triggers the heart to do what it needs to do. So fast forward to what I do with Lean Six Sigma. Lean is about exactly that. What we do when we get lean is getting rid of those things that are not working for us to provide that clarity, to create that pathway so that we can make the decisions so that with our energy of our leaders, of our people, of our products, so it can flow to where it needs to flow. So that's how I use Lean Six Sigma. How did I get into it? Out of a crisis. Like most of us, I think it was trying to innovate at a time where income was down because of we were being disrupted in the market. We were print-based educational publishing in 2010 when the death of print was declared globally. Like, hey, Amazon's here, ebooks. Who needs print books? And you being a 99% print business, it's not gonna work out for you. You versus a digital book. So it was kind of like, okay, how do we get through this? How do we keep our people? How do we, innovate in the time when like people aren't buying books and they're saying they're not going to? So that's where my whole skills came in. And again, a crisis, trying to like, hey, we need to get rid of the things that are not working for us. But at the same time, we need to innovate because if we want to be here, we have to respond to this new signal, this new like, hey, we're buying digital books. If we don't, we're not going to be here. So that's where Lean came in because we had to look at everything, get rid of the stuff that is not working for us, looking at what would work so that we can then make the energy flow into innovative solutions for our market. And that's what I tell my leaders. There's a lot of things we're carrying on. I think, again, going back to the attention economy, is what else can you get? What else do I need to learn? What else can I buy? And it's not that. All of that is making us very heavy, very top heavy, very unable to even be agile, the very thing that we know to do. And lean allows the leader to like, we don't need to take one more thing. We need to take the core things that are part of us in our identity that are going to help us continue to serve in the way that we serve, but also innovate. In our marketplace is consistently changing. We have to innovate. With the answers for yesterday are not going to answer today's problems, even tomorrow's problems. So there has to be energy flowing to that. And unless we get lean, and that's where Six Sigma comes in, we don't. Particularly what in Six Sigma. And I think I was attracted very much to something that people don't pay attention to in Six Sigma, and that's that as a Six Sigma professional, we look for wastes. So that's the first thing. We get rid of waste. That's like number one enemy. What waste? Over processing. Every time you have to fill out a form, 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and internally in the same one, or you're asking your client to fill out that form, or anybody who's been on a phone tree, you keep on giving them the same information like 4 or 5 times to talk to somebody to answer a problem. So that's a waste. It's over processing. That's one of the ways, for example. There's another ways, like over transportation, where I'm going to have to go over there to come back over here, to come back over here, where basically if I just have things in an assembly line, even for me in my office, it makes me that much more effective. So there's 8 of those, but one in particular, the one that people don't talk about is the loss of human potential. And people don't realize, hey, this indeed is a waste. not only in manufacturing in the office, but it's really, we're feeling the pain. And what is that pain? Well, from last time I heard, it was $322 billion globally due to disengagement, due to not being able to come up with the answers to the cost of replacing people, coming people, the silent quit, the even the safety issues due to distraction. They have put a number to that. So we're all paying that nice, in a sense, global tax for the loss of human potential. And that indeed is a very much a systematic way. It's not a soft skill, which is why I consistently, Chuckle's like, no, no, leadership is not a soft skill, and neither is love, neither is heart. There's such a thing as a waste, and it is called the waste of the potential of the humans. And what a terrible waste is that, isn't it? I mean, that hits us at a whole different level.
Totally, totally, totally. And that over processing, it costs so much. People think we have to keep doing the why do we have this process? Well, that's the way we've been doing it. Why do we need to change it? But you don't hone in on what is this costing us? How much
Yeah.
time, energy, efficiency, and also the waste of that potential.
Yeah.
That is becoming, and I know we're not talking about this, but I'll just drop this in. But just in this AI era, you can't
Yeah.
out robot the robot. You can't out knowledge AI anymore. So if you only
No.
see your value as what you know, you
Yeah.
better figure out another way to think about your value, because knowledge is free these days. It's
Oh,
a
yeah.
dime a dozen. So the quote unquote soft skills you're talking about, which I agree with you are absolutely not soft, those are
No.
becoming more valuable. That human centered approach, the empathy, or the creativity, me being able to connect with you, is so much more important, where we used to throw those things away as waste, but
Yeah.
that is what's becoming more and more valuable as we move on. Um,
Yeah.
and I gotta say, I love when you talked about your heart. You're like, all these things, it's too much of a good thing. I love that reframe, because it is a reframe. It's like, this is hurting me, but it's too much of a good thing. We have to take that out. And
Yeah.
sometimes we can focus too much on thinking that because it's good, we need more of it. No, we
Right.
still need to constrain what a
Yeah.
good thing is. And we
Yeah. Because of
still
like the
need to,
chaos.
exactly, because it can become chaotic.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so that's great. And thinking through that human capital. So as we move forward, as leaders, paying attention to those things more and more, because yes, organizations are bringing in the AI. Yes, all of that is happening, but we still have to pay attention to the things that are not serving, and how we get those things out of the way. So,
Yeah.
um,
I think with the AI is very interesting, right? Because a lot of times, like, oh, hey, we're just not gonna have all these problems, like, HR relations and all these things. And it was funny to me. It's like, you're so right. AI does amplify and accelerate things, right? Also meaning, if you have a gap in your culture, what do you think's gonna happen with AI? It's also gonna be amplified and it's gonna be accelerated. What may have you may have gotten away, maybe for a couple of more years. It may go a lot faster in the next month. So that is something also to think about when you're introducing these instruments. They're gonna amplify whatever's already there. They don't necessarily fix those things unless you understand what the problem is to begin with, and you were already intentional in fixing those things. And a lot of these, basically, this digital transformations are not taking that into account. They're looking, hey, this new tool is going to let you do this. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was we weren't talking to each other. We have all these processes and we have all these silos everywhere. Everybody has their own thing. And now everybody's going to amplify that 10x, 100x.
mhm,
Yeah, you do the math.
100%. Yes, because new systems do not fix problems that exist. You can't bring a system in if you don't have an efficient process to apply that
Yes.
system to. So you're right, it amplifies and magnifies those gaps. And so, since we're on the topic of disruptions
Mm-hmm.
and thinking about, because there's a lot of disruption that happens, what would you say separates teams that adapt from teams that spiral when it comes to disruptions?
Well, the adaptability one is having the skill. if you don't know how to adapt, first of all, like when it happens, even a good team, like, you can have a perfectly great player that you haven't made them play in the major leagues. So there's different pressures that come in that. So one is for those teams that already have, that already are good in sync, is learning to adapt, right? Learning to, and before you even go into the big games or the big leagues, there's constant practice. And for a leader, what is that constant practice that I can give my teams? Well, it's a delegation, is delegating with me being able to be with them, right? So even the creating the environment of consistent delegation, healthy delegation, creating already that environment that is not only gonna, yes, pass on, I want you to own this, and yes, you're gonna be responsible, but also that environment where there's also an understanding of what authority is in that. So in already building in this skill, right? Understanding, hey, I know we plan, and I think most of us know that we know that plans don't usually go the way that we intend them to, yet we still get upset when they don't. So it's this constant thing, right? Like, they kind of be like, well, why I failed, all this stuff. And so again, it's those environments, those teams that are able to adapt because they're able to communicate well about in a sense, feedback, and not what we're putting in just a sandwich technique, good, bad, good, good, not that, but actual feedback on time, on the moment, the right feedback. And I know what the right feedback is because I know you, I know what we're doing, versus the teams that don't adapt. The teams that don't adapt is because there hasn't been that happening. So there is no feedback going on, which is, I hope somebody doesn't find out, like, oh, let's see what we can get through, right? That's even the culture, like, hey, let's just make this pass by, and hopefully, if somebody says something, they will look into it. If not, let's just go through that. And that affects quality, that affects trust. And yeah, you can get away with it, but then it may be somebody else getting impacted by that. And when we talk about that, it can also be very much a safety thing. Not only the psychological safety, but actual real safety things for the consumer. And we're seeing that. We're seeing, we say like, hey, things are not lasting the way that they lasted. I thought I was getting this. There's such mistrust from one to the other. But also that starts in the teams again, because what's being rewarded? It's the reward in, when you adapt. Well, I don't have time to adapt because I got to fulfill this KPI, because I got to fulfill this number of tickets I have to close because of that. So there is no room left for a team that's being disrupted to take a breath and adapt. So that's the other part. As a leader, when you're going in a time of disruption, you have got, that is part of your process. It's not away from the process. It is part of the process to breathe, adapt, and be able to implement together. But that is the difference. I think not only in the disruption, I think that's, again, it's like you're drowning, right? I mean, there's certain things you can't do. Like, you don't care who comes, you don't care. And then you get your certification license or all this stuff. I mean, you're drowning. You're just trying to get there. But one of the things that you have to understand also in the drowning, and why the person that goes in there has to be certified, it really help out as much, is because usually the rescuer is the one that ends up drowning, and the victim might not, because the whole building down. So I would say that as a leader, first thing is you got to take care of the asset. You have to be well, even in a team that feels like it's drowning. You have got to take the time for you. I know you're serving your team. I know you've heard all these other things like, hey, service first. Yes. First, you got to take care of you, because you're going to be giving a lot in times of crisis. You're going to be giving a lot in times of adapting. And in order for them to have your best, you need to be at your best. And that means you're rested. That means that you are confident. That means that you are in alignment with your purpose, because you cannot give what you don't have.
Yeah, so good. You actually answered my next question, which was how does culture play a role in this? And you talked about quality, trust, taking care of yourself. That's a huge one for leaders, because in many ways, leadership is about being in service of your people, but you have to be well first, put your mask on before you help somebody else with theirs. And the adapting part does often require that you slow down a little bit. And as you said, slow down, take a breath. Let's reconfigure what we need to do before we move forward. And often we forget that slowing down will help to move faster in the future. So
Oh, yeah.
it's definitely one of those things. And even with the lack of trust, because people now say when you buy modern, whether it's building a house or washer dryer, whatever, we know now that it's built-in obsolescence. We know now the last one I had lasted 20 years. Now I'm thinking, okay, 5 years from now, I'm going to have to replace X, Y, and
Mm-hmm.
Z.
Mm-hmm.
And those, that's getting built into things as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good thing, like what you just said, even like in the adapting, just again, just very practical. Think about car gears. In order for you to make that turn, and if you go back, you always have to slow down to go into a different traction. Even if to go to accelerate, you always have to let go of the pedal, right? You have to let go of things to be able to even go even faster. And I think this is we have these I guess this margin of tolerance with machines, with things that we use. Let's transfer that over to our human skills. Let's transfer it to organizations, because the same thing, we're asking people to operate in fifth gear, fourth gear, first gear. For those of you that you hear that, like, there's always, you have to decelerate in order to accelerate.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. You said something, you talked about resilience has to be built before the crisis. And maybe you've
Yeah.
partially answered this already. So, but resilience needed to be built before the crisis.
Hmm.
What does that look like inside the team or the organization? Is there anything different or new that you would add to that? If I'm thinking about, well, how do I build resistance before something actually happens? What would you say to that?
Yeah. So one of the things that we have in Six Sigma is what we call the current state, right? And a current state can happen basically mean like how it is right now, not the way that ideally or all the stuff, just like today. Kind of like your regular Tuesday. We do that with people, right? It's just, what does that look like? And that's the first place where I start with organizations. So I take a diagnostic, like, hey, just where are we? A lot of people say like, don't want to do that. Like, hey, we're entering our high time. We might want to wait until it's a slow time. Just there's a whole lot of things going on. Let's just wait until there's a better time to do that. And I would say, no, you want to do that in the time of stress. Think about it in the heart. When you think about a stress test, you want to find out there's something wrong with your heart. What do? They put you on a treadmill. They get you, lying down, sitting up, standing up, and then they tell you to push until you can't push anymore, because they're trying to catch the dysfunction, if there's any, in a time of stress. So that's where I encourage, and this is what I do, is I go in the times of stress of the organization so that I can capture those parts. And when we have a snapshot, right? Again, it's a snapshot. You got to know what that is so that you know how to start building their resilience, because then, hey, once we do have that time, the next part, well, this happened because of this and this and that. We have all kinds of reasons and things, but it gives us a starting point where we can start diving down in. So how do we know? Well, you got to measure it. For that, that's what I do. I do diagnostics. I do diagnostics at a time of stress, understanding what are the functions. One of the things I understood even with my heart is initially I couldn't breathe. So guess what they thought? They thought it was a obstruction problem. They thought it was an asthma problem. They thought like, hey, actually one of the doctors said mommyitis. It's a severe case one. She's just attachment issues. Because kids don't get heart disease. That was the thing. It was this bias, right? It's already built-in bias, and we all have that. We all have a built-in bias where we may be even blaming, it's because our people, it's because those two people don't get along. Or it's because, like, that's the new kid on the block, or it's new management. And so we tend to blame these things on perhaps even things I hate. No, like in my case, no, kids don't get heart disease. That's like for older people. That's for people that have been really stressed. That doesn't go with the way that I think. And this is where the really impactful part with resilience comes in, because a lot of times you're seeing the symptoms somewhere. You're seeing the signal, like I said, in my case, I couldn't breathe, but it wasn't a lung problem. My lungs were getting impacted. It wasn't a nervous problem. My nervous system was impacted, but really what was wrong was my heart. And a lot of times that's with the organizations. Yeah, you may have productivity issues. You may have safety issues. You may have all these profit, bottom line, where it's taking your time is going more dealing with drama, company drama, versus actually doing the products. And all those are signals of we need to work on our resilience, because the real problem is the heart. And in building that, again, it's going to help you in those times of stress to not only understand how you're going to respond, but where do I need to put the focus? Where do I need to get the resources? Again, I cannot do 100% of the things all the time. I can't, I'm a human. But I do, as a leader, have to be there 100% of the times at the right times. So understanding what those right times is me as a leader is going to require understanding how my team responds to stress, how my team responds to times where everything's not now, like it's not everything is awesome, like with the Lego movie, right? Like where everything's not awesome. That's a great time to take a temperature check, because it's going to be like, hey, how are we aligning in this? How are we responding to this?
Yeah. I love that intentional stress testing because
Mm-hmm.
as you to your point, when you're being intentional about it, you are specifically looking for certain markers and you're specifically looking for how are people going to handle this? Because in a stable state, we have, our temperament, we have how we show up, we have whether we're,
And
cool, easy breezy. But when you apply stress in that same situation, we have to know how we're going to respond to that. Sometimes
yeah,
the cool, easy breezy person goes all the way to the other side and they become extreme
a
and
lot of
harsh and
times.
right? Or they get super cool, easy breezy and they're like in the corner of the room. So you have to know and understand what that looks like and
Yes.
being very specific and intentional about that. And as a leader, that is a part of your role to understand that, but also
Yeah.
this is where you can learn how to develop your team to help
Yes.
them to see what they do and how they respond under that stress so that they have an awareness. And then when
Yes.
stress is applied unintentionally, now you have a plan for what to deal with it and how to deal with it.
Yes.
That's really good. That's a great analogy. When something's wrong with your heart, they don't tell you to go lie down. They put you on the treadmill to figure out,
Yeah.
okay, when is this going to be end? And they're monitoring it. So they're not going to let you, right? So they're looking for those signals to know, okay, now we need to
Yeah.
pull you off and help you, right? Time out.
For
For
too much.
sure. Yes, for sure.
But I mean,
Wow.
we do that with other things, right? I mean, we do that even for getting ready, even think about military service, like even like in all this stuff, let me put you in the very harshest of things so that I know when you're out there, you're gonna be able to handle those. So they build resilience, they build the stress in because they know you're gonna go at some point. We don't know when. We don't know when the next time you're gonna be called up. We don't know if you ever might be called up. But if you do, you're ready.
Mhm.
And it's the same thing that we need to do with our teams.
Mhm.
But it's still those skills, that leveraging of those skills, being able to understand and having those plans, not only creates, again, the psychological safety around it, the confidence. So we need confident leaders. We need confident team members. We need people that own what they do. And we need that self-incentive, right? I mean, when you're confident, when you feel safe, when you feel prepared, you show up differently.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. So, as we think about that, because I know that can be a lot for people, let's bring it down, make it smaller, make it practical. So, if
Yeah.
you think about what can a leader do, let's say this week, to build more resilience into the system before the next disruption hits. What can they start doing? What are some small steps that they can start with over the next week?
Okay, so that's gonna be counterintuitive, maybe, but it's that building that pause. And for anybody who's gone on vacation, who's a very highly effective leader, you know how hard that is. You know how hard it is to like build in the time to be away and not in that time you're away, not be available. So, and again, it is not a soft skill. It's not like, oh, tell me to take a vacay. I'm not telling you to take a vacay. I'm telling you to build in that pause, that break, because again, we don't learn by experience. We learn by reviewed experience. Yeah, experience is a very slow way to learn, but there's a lot of learning happening right now that we need to build in that time as part of our leadership to be able to review that. So my first thing would be something practical is build in that margin, build in that time in your schedule to be able to have that review time of where you are with your team, where you are as a leader. What are those signals right now? If I was telling you, how do you measure resilience in your company right now? What would you tell me? And if that is not an easy answer, or it's like, I don't quite know, then I would say the next thing is you need to know. You need to know because it's going to require, we understand this change. And if you feel overwhelmed, likelihood that your team is feeling overwhelmed as well. So, and if you don't know, highly probable that your team doesn't know either. So requiring a team to be resilient, requiring a team to do these adapt, and we don't know exactly what that looks like ourselves for ourselves and what that looks like for them, it's just mean, right? I mean, you're requiring people to do something you haven't trained them on, or you yourself don't understand and can't transfer. So to have these expectations of having a resilient team, well, you have to show that, right? I mean, a leader doesn't just know the way, guides the way, and shows the way. And for that, I have found the most effective part is build in that time. What is the lasting transformation you're looking for? That? And it's a simple thing because we need those moments during the day. So very practical, make margin during your week and take those moments in the day where you are pausing. Because again, you need to review what it is that you're doing.
Love that so much. Hanna, thank you so much for being here today. What a pleasure. Tell us where people can find you. What do you got going on right now?
Absolutely. Well, you can find me at Heartnomics. Yes, just like you hear it, it's the heart and economics, the economy of the heart. So it's www.heartnomics.com. I'm sure you'll include the handle there. You also can find me on LinkedIn. And if you go onto my website, I actually have a quick audit, a complimentary audit for leaders, organizations. So it's going to show you that leakage I'm talking about, that stress that may be coming in. It'll give you a quick snapshot to that. And so that's available for you. Also, I just released a digital course for that internal alignment for external execution. Would love for you all to participate. And any way I can serve, set up that 20-minute strategy call. I'll be more than happy to talk about what your organization is going through and what your dreams and hopes and aspirations are.
Fantastic. Fantastic. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.